were fighting. They attached us to the, my unit never fought really as a total division. My regiment did, infantry regiment.
Which regiment were you in?
I was the, he was first. That's the bullet that I was wounded with. When I was
Oh, really?
shot. Yeah.
I was
Machine gun
wondering.
bullet.
Okay.
That's the only thing I came out with. You know what I mean? All my clothes got cut off.
Yeah.
And I had a German pistol and some other things that I had
And all that good.
possessions.
Right.
Of course, they cut your clothes off after
Yeah,
and you come out with no clothes. And so, but anyway, to make a long story short, they moved us in, and the Germans, it was just about exactly the same time the Germans initiated this breakthrough.
Right.
And
Do
so
you have a map to show me where where
I've got
you
a
were?
map.
I'll take that as a close second.
Anyway, my unit did not fight as a unit totally. I mean,
Right.
our artillery was attached to some other artillery group. Our infantry ended up being with the 3rd Division, where we were.
Right.
And it was, you know, just a very changing fast situation that
Right.
we were suddenly thrown into.
Volatile.
You know, just coming in, yeah. Because of the breakthrough, the Germans had broken through.
Just north of you too.
Yeah, in the northern part particularly. But they were shifting troops around to try to get us in position that they could do things quickly. And so that worked out nicely from my perspective. And someone came up with this and said that what Patton wanted to do was to swing south and then hit the Rhine River and then just come straight on up the Rhine, basically.
Right.
That was his strategy. And he finally got overruled, you know, in terms of not letting him do what he wanted to do after we broke out of the stalemate that he was boxed in there.
Right.
And this some of the people say that really he was wiped out. This came off an email.
Yeah,
You've heard
I've
that strategy.
I've
Yeah,
heard
I
that
don't
too.
know that that's true at all.
I mean, you basically after the bulge, he ran out of troops. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, yeah, he was looking desperately for more soldiers, so they took us in. Our unit was attached to them, and we got the presidential citation, our unit, for fighting with his group during that action. And but they had a theory that if they had shifted after this. After we broke out of the box that they had us in up north, if they had let him swing around and move from the south like he wanted to do,
Right.
the war would have ended, they said, 3 or 4 months sooner.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this was a theory these people had. But finally, I guess General Eisenhower decided that was maybe risky, I don't know. He liked Patton, they were good friends, both West Pointers, you know, from West Point. But
I got a question kind of along those lines. What is your opinion of the Patton-Montgomery rivalry and some of the decisions that were made along those lines? Specifically,
make
Operation Mark.
actually.
You just followed orders.
We got a briefing, yeah.
Yeah.
A briefing, you know, occasionally. But I mean, maybe if we weren't fighting that particular time, they'd give us a briefing about what was happening further north or in the Pacific or, you know, kind of a general thing. Nothing very specific. I mean, we were so busy with what we were trying to do and get supplies in and get strategy worked out and so forth that we didn't have time really for meetings. I mean, at my level, we didn't.
Right.
Yeah. What we were doing basically, once we stopped the Germans and the line, you could hear the tanks and everything moving from where we were. We were further south, but where the action was still plenty keen there as well. What the Germans had done after they had broken through further north is before we could advance closer to Colmar and Strasbourg, they came in and planted shoe mines, these little things about like that everywhere. And then of course the snow came, and snow was like that deep. And fortunately for me, when we had to jump off to start moving forward to break out of this box, my company was in reserve just by chance. I was Company C. They took Company A and B, were the ones that made the initial thrust to try to break the line where the Germans had been dug in. And they were in bunkers next to the river, basically.
Right.
And the snow covered everything, so you couldn't tell where anything was, really. But they jumped off first, and they kept us in reserve to see how this was going to work out. And it was a bad situation. I mean, they didn't know it was mined. And start off, when you started walking across the field, then you started setting off mines. And what it would do is just mangle your foot from the ankle down. So you were out of it, you know. I mean, you'd never be back to fight, I mean, for sure. You'd have to be hospitalized and be a casualty and be a drain on the unit rather than
So the
a
snow,
tangible force.
the snow is deep enough to hide the mines, but not.
Oh
deep
yeah,
enough
the
to
snow was
absorb
at
any
least
of it.
knee deep or more.
Oh
Yeah.
really? What was knee deep? Well,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we had on white camouflage
Right.
things over our helmets and stuff. Well, anyway, we lost a lot of people in the first two. I guess probably half of our people got wounded in the first action, the major action we had like that. And so then, pretty quickly, they called my unit, our unit, my division, my company up, and to take the initiative. And I had 2 scouts, and I was a sergeant. I was the 3rd person moving through the minefield. Now you could tell where the mines were basically by where the first aid people were working and the wounded were. And we had definite orders that we could not stop and help anybody back, that we had to keep moving forward. Yeah. So we were making some progress towards the river area, and then they opened up on us with mortars. It was pretty much a level area where we were. It was in the mountains, but this area was plateaued to the riverside. It was all that snow. And we were pretty much trapped out in the middle of this field. And they just had us pinned down, and they were dropping bombs. And if you stayed where you were, of course, this pattern, the way they had it, would take out everything in that pattern.
Right.
And as long as you didn't move, they didn't shoot at you as an individual. But they dropped a mortar between my 2 scouts. I had 2 scouts in front of me, about 4 from here to the woods down there. And then the rest of our unit, my people were back of us in my company. And they dropped a mortar shell between my 2 scouts, and they both got hit, one in the shoulder and one in the leg. And I asked where they hit, and they said yes. And I said, well, you stay where you are, and I'll crawl and give you some help. Well, I hadn't seen any machine guns or anything. They hadn't opened up in those. When I started crawling, a machine gun, which we hadn't seen, opened up. And I was crawling on the ground like this, and I caught up. This was a ricochet, this bullet here. There's a dent in the back of it, like. But that was twisting like that, and it got shot from an angle like this, and it hit the frozen ground, and the bullet was spinning. And it hit just above the hip, but it hit the hip bone, smashed, knocked all the top corners of that off. But fortunately, that turned the bullet. Instead of going, I looked after I was shot to see if it didn't come out this side, because it went in above my belt here. So I figured, man, I've got it right in the intestine, so I'm not long for this world. Looked over here, it didn't come out, and then I figured, well, where in the world did it go? And I tried to use my leg, couldn't use the leg. It messed up the joint, and but it turned, went right down my femur, and ended up against the bone pointed back this way, down almost to my knee.
Really?
And I thought, well, they'll just cut a hole and take that out. They opened me up, of course, from where it went in down to there. So I went after I finally came to. I was in a cast just under my ribs. Just my toes were out on the right leg in a cast, and down to my left with a stick between the 2. So I could not move my hip at all and had to be totally flat on my back. That's the way I was for many months after I came back from overseas like that on a ship.
Right.
But I was lucky. I mean, because I was sure it had punctured some of my intestines by where it had gone in.
Right.
And I couldn't tell where it went beyond that until after they did the surgery. And I was in the hospital in Europe for a while. Went to a field hospital first, and they kept you waiting until they did triage.
Right.
Worst ones first.
Right.
And one other little incident I will tell you was I figured my time was up for sure. After they got me, they put me. The medics finally got to where I was and got me up, and with some help, and I got back and they had me on a litter, one of those types that you carry like that, and covered me up and said, "Well, we'll get to you when we can." And all they could tell was just bleeding. See, it was just a hole here, but nothing in the middle of the place. And they'd come around about every 20 minutes or so and raise the blanket and see how much blood you had lost, and decide whether you had to go for surgery right then or you could wait. If you could wait, you waited. Well, I have no idea how long it would. You're kind of in a state of shock and you're cold, and
Right.
figure, well, this is it. But anyway, they came back once this next time and raised the thing and looked, and he said, "See if you can lift him." And I was stuck to in blood to the litter thing. He said, "We got to take him now." I did hear that. Took me in and put me out, and as I say, I figured they would just take out the bullet, But I was in shock when I found out what they'd done and how much of a damage was really done to that hip. But the incident I started to tell you, didn't get to it. As they finally got me back to put me on a Jeep, they laid us across the back of a Jeep in this
Right. The litters.
litters bag, and said, "Hang on." And I heard the man, another person that was working with getting these medics evacuated, tell my driver, they hit 2 out of the last 3 vehicles that went up this road. The Germans had mortars up on the hill above. All they had to do is estimate the speed of your vehicle.
Yeah.
And when they dropped the mortar shell in, and they could hit you. They said he hit 2 out of the 3 Jeeps that made that run just before mine. And so the driver said, "Well, we're going to make a run for it." And he said, "You hang on, because I'm on the shell holes, and I'm going to hit them as fast as I can." And they dropped the shell in front of us and one behind us, but they didn't get mine. Didn't get me, thank you. But then it got further back, and they had us in a hospital in France for a while. Did some surgery like that, and then said, "We'll have to do the rest of it when we get you back to the States." I came back on the hospital ship, and one incident with that, when I figured my number was surely up. We were at sea, and we had a terrible. The hospital ship was by itself, and it was not escorted or anything. It just had a big red cross on the stack and lights on that, so hopefully nobody's going to take it out.
Right.
But they picked up some wounded in Italy and then came to Marseille and picked me up there, and a lot of other wounded in the ship. And we were crossing about halfway back, I guess, coming back in April. I was wounded January 24th of 45.
Right.
And this was like April, they were moving me back to the States.